you either think, hey, MEV is great because we're monetizing, i.e., but you're actually kind of stealing money from end users, I like to say. Or you could say, hey, if, as we scale, as we start doing more on chain, as the amount of volume on chain grows by, I think the amount of volume on chain is going to grow by another order of magnitude. Like we have huge growth ahead of us in terms of stablecoin utilization, banking rails, every consumer app product. Our DeFi is going to grow massively. And I think AI is going to really spur a lot of that growth. And if you think, well, if MEV is going to keep growing in proportion to the amount of volume, this problem just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And right now you kind of have to deal with it because you have to layer on all these kind of cumbersome UX inhibiting products on top of the blockchain to go into MEV resistant zones. Whereas on FAIR, it's literally built into the core of consensus. You can't front run anyone. Will the network miss out on some revenue? Yeah, but I think, it's this kind of Jevons paradox where it doesn't matter if the pie grows much bigger. If we can help, such a larger quantity of transactions and, volume occur, validators are still going to get paid really well, and so are stakers, but it's not going to come at the cost from, taking money from an end user.
Welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad here with Nomadic. Today's show is with Jack O'Halloran, co-founder of SKALE and CEO of SKALE Labs. So we just got off the interview. I've known Jack for years. I was excited to catch up with him on this new blockchain they're launching called FAIR. But Nomadic, what were your thoughts on Jack?
Yeah, first of all, I think Jack is just a guy I'd love to get a beer with. I wasn't even prepared for just how likable Jack was. But on sort of what they're building, I think what stood out to me is they're building something new. I'll let Jack kind of explain that on the pod, but they're coming at it with a very differentiated approach, which I think is definitely needed in the space now. You can't just be launching kind of generalized L1 block space anymore. I think those days are kind of done. The other thing that I think excites me with this is I'm sick of building infrastructure for the sake of building infrastructure. We're also moving past that. And what Jack explains is this new infrastructure that they are building can lead to new products that maybe couldn't exist in DeFi or in the AI space until now. So that excites me as well. So those are kind of the things that stood out for me on this one.
I think another thing with Jack is, over the years, he's very consistently been ahead of the curve in terms of seeing where the puck is going. So when he first started building SKALE, and I'm listening to him at like a conference back in maybe 2019, 2020, there weren't that many applications. Like there weren't real issues yet with scalability with Ethereum. We were just looking for like use cases that users would be excited about, but he really foresaw this need to build an EVM compatible chain that users would be more delighted to use, that would be fast and cheap in terms of transaction fees. There's also too like some benefits there with SKALE where you aren't actually paying for the gas. So there's a lot that they foresaw, and so I'm thinking about all that they've learned over the years, and then how that's informing what they're building now with this new L1 called FAIR.
Yeah, I think the other thing with this, like this isn't just like a technical conversation. I think Jack just has a ton of insights, and again, like I alluded to earlier, he's just like a great character who has been in DeFi and crypto really since its inception. So I think people are just going to enjoy listening to a long-standing builder in the space.
So before we get started, just a quick reminder, if you listen to the podcast on YouTube or Apple or Spotify, please subscribe there. And then also you'll want to go to the-edge.xyz. That's a great place where you can get access to all the written content that we put out aside from the podcast. And then one last thing, as always, please show some love for our sponsors. Again, we work really hard to curate partners that are not just sponsors. These are folks that we've known and we enjoy working with. We know their products. We believe what they're building is valuable. So if you go into the show notes, you'll find links to all of those different protocols and applications. So go exploring. There's lots of great partners there, lots of great yields to discover through our partners at the Edge podcast. The crypto UX is broken, and AI, you can't trust it. Let Magic Newton set you free. It puts financial freedom on autopilot. It does all the work for you 24/7, so you can go do what you want. This is the vision behind Magic Labs, the creators of embedded wallets. Used and backed by the best, see for yourself with a simpler crypto UX powered by verifiable AI agents. Get started at newton.xyz. Maple Finance is one of my favorite products in DeFi. It is a gateway to sustainable real yield powered by over $1 billion in AUM across USDC and BTC products. And now with SYRUP USDC by Maple, anyone can earn institutional-grade yield. Learn more at SYRUP.FI, and thanks to Maple for supporting us here at the Edge Podcast and Edge Newsletter. Overwhelmed trying to manage your crypto and DeFi investments? Meet iYIELD, a free financial planning tool for crypto natives and yield farmers. iYIELD's dashboard compares returns from your DeFi positions side by side, providing clarity to help you make better decisions. iYIELD supports a growing list of over 16,000 tokens and 40 of the top DeFi and staking protocols across 17 blockchains, including Ethereum L2s. The best part is that iYIELD is 100% free, anonymous, and there are no ads. Check out iYIELD.com today to take control of your financial future. Hey folks, I wanted to tell you a bit about our sponsor, PYTH Oracles, your go-to source for smarter data to power smarter contracts. PYTH delivers real-time market data for crypto, equities, FX, and commodities to over 80 blockchains. With 120 plus major market participants like Jane Street, Binance, and CBOE, PYTH ensures secure, low-latency feeds trusted by 430 DeFi apps. You can learn more about PYTH by going to pyth.network, and thanks to the PYTH community for supporting us here at the Edge Podcast and Edge Newsletter. All right, let's introduce Jack O'Halloran, co-founder of SKALE and CEO of SKALE Labs. Jack, welcome to the Edge Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's really good to reconnect. We're going to talk today all about the work that you've done with SKALE over many years, but we really want to learn more about this next generation L1 blockchain. And so my understanding, just having had conversations with the team, is that if Bitcoin is synonymous with security, if Ethereum is to programmability, if Solana is to speed and low cost, this new blockchain FAIR is to fairness and AI optimization. And so we're going to talk about why that matters, what that means for us as users. Before we get into that, let's talk more about, your background. Can you tell us more about, what were you doing before crypto? There is a career there that I do want to talk about before you actually start building in crypto.
Awesome. Yeah. So I started my career in enterprise software. Cryptography was a big piece of the first company I was at. It was called Good Technology, and it was a mobile security product, and we had, I think, 92 of the Fortune 100, and we ran, cryptographic secure email and applications, and Motorola acquired us. Had a successful exit, and then I started an AI company in 2008. It actually initially was a digital currency company, where NASA was our first customer. We had these NASA bucks, and the market crashed, and we kind of fully pivoted into doing AI for sales and marketing execution. And we're the largest AI commercial product for life science for many years. So that was kind of my, as an enterprise software person, deep tech, was really interested in crypto. And when I started my next company in 2017, I couldn't do anything else other than crypto. I'd got down the rabbit hole.
I was going to say, you were kind of in both almost crypto and AI before it was cool way back in 2008. That's pretty impressive. So maybe Jack, bring us up to speed then. Where was your touch point with crypto? How did you fall down that rabbit hole? And then can you kind of connect the dots from that touch point to, hey, all of a sudden I'm building SKALE. What's happened here?
Yeah, I think I used to live in Palo Alto, and a bunch of my these Stanford engineering guys I was friends with sent the white paper around, I think in 2011. It was going all over, the Bitcoin white paper. But I kind of dismissed it. And then I think I was in China in 2013, and I used to go to Asia every month for 7 years. I'd spend 10 to 14 days there and kind of traveling all over the world doing this company. And one of my buddies was one of the founders of CoinDesk. And he's like, you must buy Bitcoin. And he had this, and I was like, wow, he gave me this whole picture on it. I was like, now I think I get this thing. And I kind of that was my first, foray down the rabbit hole. But then when I learned about Ethereum, I learned, just really captured me because you could create new business models, new business structures, new, ways of programmable money. And that's when I knew I had to start something in this space after I learned about Ethereum.
I want to get your perspective around the time that you're starting to build Scale. Can you take us back to just what things were like then? Because there are no L2s at that point. There's a lot of talk about scaling Ethereum. Really, there's nothing working but Ethereum at this point. I mean, I think Solana was being built maybe, and, you have Cosmos as well, but I mean, there's no applications at this point. I'm just trying to revisit the mindset that you had and, some of the challenges you saw that you were, looking to solve with Scale.
Yeah, it was, it was really interesting. It was almost like the Olympics of who could come up with the most complicated strategies, and everyone gets so excited about them. And that's why there's such a narrative culture. And then you'd go look, at DappRadar and there'd be 20,000 unique active wallets a day. It's we just still had really low usage. And part of that, it was like chicken and egg. There weren't enough apps that were ready. And there also, the other side was if you were ready, you couldn't scale because it just was not possible to scale anything other than TVL. You could scale the financial rails, you could scale the amount of money, but it was really hard to scale quantity of transactions. And, we were looking initially to build an application, and we had I had different application ideas. I met Stan, my co-founder. He had different application ideas. And that he's like, oh, I think I'm going to do all 4 of these. I was like, Stan, why do you think you could do 4 things? He's like, oh, well, I've built the scaling infrastructure. And I was like, tell me more about this. And Stan's a, world-renowned cryptographer, world-renowned physicist. He's a very, very smart guy. And he had designed the scaling infrastructure. And so we were calling it middleware, like Ethereum scaling middleware instead of layer 2, which is then kind of interesting because then the whole term layer 2 then turned into just rollups. And if you weren't that, then you were a layer 1. So we were kind of in this no man's land for a while where we weren't a layer 2, we weren't a layer 1. And frankly, even though we were having huge success, it's not good to not be part of a category. And, we learned a few things, I think, just about how framing, but for our developer approach, it was really successful. Developers get nuance, they get, trade-offs, and we did really, really well.
I also want to talk about you being a builder in the US. So you were based in the Bay Area. I think you still are based in the Bay Area, but I think I got to meet up with you in person around 2019, 2020. And I was living in the Bay Area. You guys had an office there in San Francisco, and you were one of the few teams that was known to be building in the crypto space. There was just a handful in the Bay Area, which is shocking. You'd think there'd be more of you. And I think this was a reflection of how unfriendly regulators were to crypto founders or DeFi builders, infra builders. And so what can you recall from that time frame, building? Because now it's a point of pride, I think, for teams that are building in the US. It's nothing about being a United States citizen. It's the fact that the US is now seemingly, wanting to support you as builders. There's been a real regime shift, obviously, in the last year. So what's that been like for you as someone who lived through a pretty terrible era, and now things are looking much brighter?
So first, I think back in 2017, 2018, it was still crypto was not politicized yet. It was, both sides didn't get it. It was kind of nice. At the same time, there was not a lot of clarity. And I think Jay Clayton did a pretty good job with some these frameworks. If you're okay, we're going to go off this framework. The SEC leader writes a blog and it drives every, piece of legal strategy. It was kind of a funny time. But the thing is, there were no rails to build on yet from a company perspective. And so you had to start 3 companies back then. You had to start, this whole tech product and sales, a normal software company. You had to figure out this foundation, token infrastructure, legal landscape, And it was like literally starting in as much work as a normal company. And then the third piece is you have to have this like retail marketing machine to like do consumer, you have to reach people globally. And it's like very different, it's definitely multi-audience marketing. And so you have these like, and now it's way easier. You just come in and there's all these services that like, help you like launch your token and manage the legal frameworks. But back then we were just paying like, I think everyone's paying millions of dollars in legal fees just to have the lawyers figure stuff out for themselves that then they now sell to other people. So it was a wild time. But then as we went to this next era, the Gary Gensler era, all of a sudden crypto got very politicized, and all of a sudden it was like we were the bad guys. And we're like, hold on, we're trying to create jobs. We're trying to, give money back to the little guy. We're trying to help out consumers, not the big banks and the big, GAFA companies. And it was really a wild time because, your own government, it felt like, was trying to kill you. And now we're thankfully at a state where I think we still have a lot of catching up to do, but we're getting clarity. We're getting, it's about as crypto friendly as we could be right now. And it's just feels a lot better, but it was tough being a US builder for a while.
We had Miles Jennings on, who is head of policy and general counsel at A16Z Crypto. And, he was talking about the fact that for years, it felt like lawyers were designing protocols, that basically founders had an idea. And obviously, I don't want to downplay the fact, like, a lot of the work is happening at the founder level. But at the end of the day, they would go to lawyers to try to translate, like, how can we do what we're doing within some framework that is going to keep us out of like hot water with, the SEC and so forth. And so, it's really, really exciting to see this shift.
Yeah, I think that was particularly true with DeFi, because DeFi was this, you had this product, but you had this back end, then you had this front end that wasn't decentralized. And, and then like, how does your token play in and what does it do? Like, if you're like layer 1, layer 2, it's much more clear. Actually, layer 2 rollups, it's not clear because you're running centralized architecture and servers. You're like, claiming it's decentralized because you're putting, the executing, the finality happens on the mainnet. But yeah, it's a different, definitely a wild world. But even just setting a foundation up, getting your fundraising done was not simple.
Yeah, and I know there's still kind of PTSD spillover. So people, even though they know it's probably safer, they're still doing it that kind of overly convoluted way, just, for safety right now, even going forward, with still setting up foundations and, crossing all your T's, dotting your I's, and just, there's still not clarity, but
I mean, it'd be great if we could just be like, hey, you're a US company, you want to launch a crypto project. Okay, it needs to be decentralized. It needs to do this, this, and this. And great, you can just do it. I hope we can get there.
So Jack, I want to pivot into Scale a bit more. I'm curious how you describe Scale to somebody, like what your elevator pitch would be for it, or even like the general mission behind what Scale is to you.
Yeah, well, I think I feel like in order to answer that effectively, I also need to talk about what we're doing at the layer 1 level. But let me first start with just Scale. And the goal of Scale was to have a low cost place to execute transactions for millions and hundreds of millions or potentially even billions of users in gaming, in Web3 social, in consumer applications, in this area where you had a lot of volume and like lower transaction quantities and not your DeFi whale zone. So that was the goal of Scale. And so now we've been successful at that. We're number 5, 6, or 7 every day of all blockchains, all layer 1s, all layer 2s globally in terms of unique active wallets and transaction volume. And so we've got, 350 some applications have signed up to be building on Scale. Lots of the largest games in the world are on Scale, lots of AI applications, lots of consumer apps, business apps, payment apps. So, we've done well in that category. And that's, part of it is there's been zero gas fees. You buy Scale tokens as a developer and you pay the fees to the validators through kind of a rental model, like a decentralized SaaS model. And then we connected that to Ethereum, and a lot of Ethereum functionality actually supported Scale. So we were this quasi layer 2, which I still say it's a layer 2 because it's a second layer on Ethereum. It just doesn't do rollups, and it uses Ethereum and it scales Ethereum. So anyways, that's Scale, and happy to kind of, well, I think a segue into the next piece here is you look at that, and we built this highly scalable environment, but it's not capturing economic value in terms of TVL and DeFi traction. And that's because it wasn't the design. The design was to let Ethereum do that and let people mint assets on Ethereum and then connect to Scale and have all these, really low cost, high speed transactions. And, in the market, I think, one, we've noticed that like, hey, it's been difficult being on Ethereum lately, especially we're not a rollup. And then we also see these other layer ones that we have far superior technology to that we think we could be running circles around, especially with these new upgrades. And so there is a decision, lots of, open source communication amongst the developer community and the dApp builders and validators. And there will be a layer 1 launching. That's the big news. It's going to be called FAIR, which is, with the AI highlighted, it's very catering towards AI products and agentic AI products and DeFi and finance and payments. And the big ahas are two things. One, it'll be fully MEV resistant, the mempool entirely encrypted. And two, it's going to be running this next generation EVM. It's even faster than Scale's current EVM setup. So it's, super performant, high-speed EVM like you see in, some of these big L1s that are launching, but I think even faster with full encryption of the mempool.
Jack, so there's a ton of things to dive into. I want to definitely get into FAIR and this kind of new DeFi angle that you're kind of heading down. But first, I just want to back up to something you said about Scale that I thought was pretty impressive. So I wasn't aware of kind of that level of traction that you've had in some of these like bigger consumer areas. So gaming has been something I've really wanted to happen in Web3 personally. It's something I still believe in, but I feel like it just keeps kind of getting pushed out. Like, hey, when is this going to get really big? So could you kind of call out, like, what are the current areas of success for Scale with some of these big consumer kind of verticals? Like what is it in gaming? Is it in AI? Like where is that user base kind of congregating or coming from that's currently using Scale?
Yeah, I mean, gaming is our biggest category, but we also do really well with AI. So there's some really, I think 6 of the top 10 AI products by unique active wallets are on Scale. The last I checked. I'm looking today, Scale's number 5 of all blockchains and L2s in terms of transaction volume on dApp Radar. We had 23 million in the last 7 days. Over the last 30 days, 98 million transactions, on-chain transactions. And by the way, I get this feedback. Oh, people say, what? Hold on. Are you serious? And so that's why, hey, I love being on the podcast and being here in front of people to tell people that. Like, we've been successful with our goal. We just need to grow, we think, our reach by having this layer 1. But we're, then in terms of unique active wallets, let's see, we are number 8 today. And, near Solana base or top 3, we're sitting at 8. We're usually between 5 and 8. But yeah, that's because we win because we have differentiation, and the end user doesn't pay a gas fee. Now, validators still get paid, and stakers, but they get paid because the fee comes from a rental model. So the unit economics are better. And then there's another thing called S-Fuel that is essentially like a non-monetary gas unit that makes sure there's no spamming. It protects the network and makes sure the network isn't getting overloaded.
MANTLE is charting a course towards a future of enabling crypto access for everyone, with major endeavors to build MANTLE Banking and MANTLE Index 4. MANTLE Banking means a new crypto neobank that helps users spend, save, and invest across their fiat and crypto finances, all in one account. MANTLE Index 4 is a tokenized fund in partnership with one of the leading tokenization platforms in the market. You can think of MI4 as the S&P 500 of crypto. To learn more, check out group.mantle.xyz, and thanks to the MANTLE community for supporting us here at the Edge Podcast and Edge Newsletter.
Another innovative thing from Scale was no gas fees. Can you kind of maybe just riff on how that works within Scale?
Yeah, I'm gonna start that. That, by the way, I have to say is like such an advantage because every day we beat competitors that are top 10, top 20 tokens by market cap. And how often does that happen in like centralized B2B software? Very rarely. Like you're not having the little guy consistently beat the big guy. And we're so differentiated. And the thing is, there's still fees, but there are chain fees. So, it just makes so much more sense because you actually penalize your users the more they use your product. They pay more, they keep having to pay more gas fees. And, we learned that in Web 2 where all of a sudden people are like, hey, like don't charge users anything and then charge them later for the usage amount or have them like have a subscription. And you don't want to like penalize and disincentivize them from using the product. Now, and so it's actually kind of complicated how it all works because even at the consensus level, what's happening is validators are not getting paid block rewards to execute each block on Scale. They're getting paid monthly and they work as a team. It's like unified validation and they monitor each other. So instead of competing, they work together and then they split the pool of inflation and chain fees equally based off of for every node that, got this binary score of 1 compared to 0. And if you don't have enough uptime, if you have latency, if you're not running the right hardware, if you're, dishonest, you don't get the reward. But as long as you do the right stuff, you're splitting it. And we felt like it was just a much better model for scaling gaming and, high volume products. And now AI has really become a category. And it works. And I think it's going to pair really nicely with the layer 1 in that it's, DeFi appreciates different things. They appreciate more security and they don't mind paying gas fees. And, they want to have one larger L1 product, whereas Scale has, over 15 different chains all operating on one validator network. So there's different trade-offs that were made there to really support game devs and AI devs and consumer app devs.
So Jack, something else, your team published this BYTE protocol recently, and it's basically an MEV protection mechanism. Can you speak to that a bit? And then I believe, so this kind of rolls into what you were alluding to earlier with this launch of FAIR. Maybe just discuss this new kind of innovation on the MEV side, and then kind of what you're launching with FAIR. Just give us maybe a bigger overview.
Yeah. And, I have to say, this is like, I really love talking about this because I think it's kind of a radical topic. You either think, hey, MEV is great because we're monetizing, i.e., but you're actually kind of stealing money from end users, I like to say. Or you could say, hey, if, as we scale, as we start doing more on chain, as the amount of volume on chain grows by, I think the amount of volume on chain is going to grow by another order of magnitude. Like we have huge growth ahead of us in terms of stablecoin utilization, banking rails, every consumer app product. Our DeFi is going to grow massively. And I think AI is going to really spur a lot of that growth. And if you think, well, if MEV is going to keep growing in proportion to the amount of volume, this problem just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And right now you kind of have to deal with it because you have to layer on all these kind of cumbersome UX inhibiting products on top of the blockchain to go into MEV resistant zones. Whereas on FAIR, it's literally built into the core of consensus. You can't front run anyone. Hey, will the network miss out on some revenue? Yeah, but I think, it's this kind of Jevons paradox where it doesn't matter if the pie grows much bigger. If we can help, such a larger quantity of transactions and, volume occur, validators are still going to get paid really well, and so are stakers, but it's not going to come at the cost from, taking money from an end user.
Yeah, and there's this major narrative right now in crypto. Maybe it's just crypto Twitter, but this thing called REV, real economic value, and it's essentially adding transaction costs with MEV and coming up with this metric to grade, I guess, just the overall economic activity of the chain. And I don't hate it, but I don't love it either, because to your point, Jack, I think we're starting to measure and call something good that is extractable in nature. And should we really be building with that as a North Star? Hey, let's see how much of this MEV we can get from our customers, like you called out. So I mean, that's like my take on it, but curious if you've like heard of this term. And
yeah, no, I think you're totally, and I think crypto has a lot of good marketers, and that's spend. That's marketing spend. Like, oh, and they're like, let's turn this negative into a positive and start monetizing it. It doesn't feel good if you're the one getting sandwich attack or front run. Thing is, you don't even know when you're getting front run all the time when you're out trading. We've got a lot of DeFi people listening here. You're getting front run all the time. You're getting back run. Hopefully you're setting the slippage through the, UI and you're not getting sandwich attacked. But the other thing is that, like, I look at two big components of why I think MEV has an expiration date. And if it does, like, why would someone use a blockchain with MEV when they don't have to? So I think, one big piece of this is just, like you said, end users at some point, like, don't need to keep paying this tax, and validators actually are going to like turn into a more commodity market. They're not going to, and so there's some arguments that say, hey, if we don't have MEV, then there's nothing. It's, cost of transactions is going to get so low, we can't pay validators. The reality is you're still going to make good money running infrastructure. If you look at the way infrastructure has grown in every other category, it gets commoditized, the cost, halves, and the volume doubles like X number of years, right? And the same thing's going to happen with validation. Like, it's just, it's going to be more competitive. Bigger companies are going to get involved. They're willing to take lower margins, and they're not going to need MEV, and they're going to make they're going to keep making money doing what they're doing. And I think that's going to happen. The other thing is, right now with MEV, guess what? You're limited in a lot of things you can do. You can't even have limit orders. Why don't we have limit orders indexes? Because limit orders are just going to be out there getting poached, right? But what if you could put a limit order out that was blind and no one could see your limit order, and and then you just are able to flow with and so right now there's only market orders. The other thing that's really critical is indexes. We don't see any indexes in DeFi. We had DeFi Pulse a long time ago, right? But it's hard to do an index in DeFi because of the rebalancing. Indexes have to constantly rebalance or periodically rebalance. And when you do that, guess what? They get front run because they're like, oh, here, this is going to happen. You're going to have to buy all of this. And they just become incredibly inefficient vehicles. Well, with an MEV resistant blockchain, you can have all of a sudden like indexes, which are a huge part of centralized finance. And why wouldn't you hold an index of all these different assets in DeFi? If you could, I think people would. It'd make their decisions easier. Well, I'll just hold these 5 tokens instead of, this one and have to make a bet. Or I have to go to like Coinbase and buy the Coin 50 or something to have an index. But our goal is to let that live and come to life in a decentralized manner.
So I've got a lot more questions about just the approach of like what you're building with FAIR. But I do want to ask the most obvious around scale. So like, are FAIR and scale, separate things here? I guess like if I'm a listener or a user, I'm probably asking like, why build another blockchain? So yeah, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, what I'd say is we're really into customer development, talking to developers, and developers in our ecosystem really felt that they could, one, get more value out of scale by being connected to a deeper liquidity pool. And we, concurrently had come up with this new technology that we think it's the world's most advanced layer 1. So it's frankly impossible to make that live within the Scale ecosystem. It's a new blockchain. But they are, they're sister networks. And the other cool thing is day one, FAIR is going to have access to these 350 plus applications on Scale. And they're going to, it's going to have traction out of the gates because of that. Number two, to pay that back, FAIR is actually going to do a few things. One, it's going to airdrop tokens to Scale holders. And so there's going to be a bunch of timestamps over, upcoming periods of time. And whoever owns Scale on those times is going to get an airdrop of Scale that will have some lock period, and the exact quantities, need to be established with lots of different people. But there's going to be that piece. The other thing is FAIR is going to be a dual token network, and then we'll have a FAIR token for gas fees, but you're going to have to use Scale and burn Scale inside of FAIR. So FAIR ends up becoming a deflationary force on the Scale network because validators are going to have these medallions. They have to burn scale in order to have the medallion to run a node. Scale chains can have to burn scale in order to use the Byte Protocol SDK or the FAIR SDK to run, this new tech in these scale chains. And there's a lot of other methods. Like we're looking at, being able to even use scale as a gas fee that just gets totally burned. So we're building synergies because one, we care about scale. We've been doing it forever. We are doing this because we think it's going to make scale more successful, but we also want to make sure that tokens capture value together in a positive way that helps both ecosystems grow collectively. And so there are a lot of thought went into it, but if you're a Scale community member, this is highly positive for you. And I think we're going to pull a lot more people in by having L1 through the lens of FAIR that will then become part of this broader Scale ecosystem.
Speaking of synergy, Jack, is there any synergy you see with FAIR and Ethereum? Like, I'm wondering, is there a modular approach here where we could have builders who, they're building on FAIR for X reasons, and then, they're also ultimately building, through Ethereum? Like, does that tech stack for builders over the coming years, does it have multiple blockchains in it, alongside FAIR, or do you envision more of this reliant upon just FAIR?
Yeah, well, what I'd say is we've been part of the Ethereum community for a really long time. Know their, core team and their founders, and we're at like 30 different, ETH hackathons from in the early days. So we love Ethereum. What I'd say is the Ethereum strategy for scalability has been so centered on rollups, and we were the ones saying, hey, but then you're going to have centralization, and you're going to have high fees, and you're going to have all these other issues that now everyone's like, and you're going to have all this liquidity fragmentation, and it's going to become parasitic to the TVL on Ethereum, and all these things that everyone's like, we need based rollups because the L2 ecosystem's killing ETH. That's what we were saying, and so we're kind of, in a way, we're voting with our building, and we're taking a lot of the functionality off of Ethereum. We're moving it to FAIR. Okay. So we're leaving Ethereum. Now we still are friendly with them, and there'll be a bridge. And I think builders that build on Scale will want to build on Ethereum, Scale, and FAIR. But in a lot of ways, we just, we picked a different strategy, and we think that the network, these 350 applications, are going to get a lot more value by having FAIR be their liquidity base as layer one than the ETH mainnet.
Jack, I want to ask you just about users for FAIR. So you've mentioned you're kind of leaning into DeFi and AI, but what's the strategy to win in this environment? Because ultimately it gets competitive. You're needing to draw in users and interest and essentially fight in this pool of other L1s or other alternative blockchains to build products. So yeah, what's the overall strategy? I know we were talking offline a bit just about some of your interactions with customers, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. But yeah, just in general, how do you approach, bootstrapping an ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different pillars. The first pillar is that this new ecosystem gets to start with, this new layer one gets to start with all the traction in the Scale network. And right now, Scale it's like a leaky bucket. It leaks value capture to Ethereum and to Binance primarily. Lots of the economic activity for our top applications happen just there, whereas all the computation and the transactions and all that happens on Scale. So we're going to capture that value back by, getting all these apps on day one. The second piece was we thought we had this great tech, and we started talking to people, and FAIR had a completely different name. We weren't really as focused on AI. We started talking to people, and we realized that a lot of people don't care about MEV. It's kind of remember when all our data was constantly being stolen in the mid-aughts, and everyone's like, who cares? Take my data. Now there's the perspective has changed. Well, MEV is still there, but when you talk to AI builders who are and people who are doing programmatic trading, not through agentic AI, but high volume programmatic trading, the cost of MEV is just extrapolated out massively, okay? And they care. And we started talking to these people, and they said, wow, and I do other things. I could do limit orders. I can do index rebalancing. I can do my agentic AI is going to have 100x of volume. And, it'll be holding some delta neutral position, helping someone trade. And it's going to, instead of one user doing 3 trades in a day, you might have it doing 3,000 trades, while still not exposing you to, your bag in any direct manner. But if your volume goes up that much, so are your costs through slippage and through of MEV effectively. And so these people cared a lot more. And so that really drove us into saying, hey, let's lean into supporting the AI market. I think the agentic AI market for DeFi is just at the very early stages. And I think we're not even going to call it agentic AI. It's just going to be, we're going to use large language model technology in almost all our programmatic trading products. And it will kind of become more of a back-end technology. And on the front end, people are just like, yeah, trade, do this, do X, Y, Z for me. I don't care what the tech is. And that's how tech usually evolves. So, we've got to bootstrap the network. We're going to do it through those. I think those are going to be 2 really key mechanisms, having like really unique product market fit value for builders, in FAIR, and then also serving the SKALE community and making sure SKALE, is rewarded in return. And I think the networks can grow in a really synergistic manner.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about our sponsor GEARBOX, the protocol that reimagines on-chain lending. With GEARBOX, you can access 10x credit across DeFi or lend for passive yields with single asset deposits and no impermanent loss. Users can access leverage to margin trade, stake, farm, and more. To learn more about GEARBOX, go to GEARBOX.fi.
Egg. A quite astonishing commodity. The cause of your desire. Egg. Which fills the inner void. Egg.
Eggs are pretty epic, but you know what's more epic? Paying for them with crypto. Borrow, earn, and now pay with MOONWELL.
Say hello to Puffer UNIFI. Puffer Finance is expanding beyond native liquid restaking with new products such as UNIFI-based ROLLUP and UNIFI Pre-Confirmations AVS. UNIFI is not just another L2. UNIFI is a based rollup, one that will solve L2 issues, such as slow withdrawals versus instant withdrawals with Puffer UNIFI. Puffer UNIFI is fast, capable of sub-second transactions. UNIFI also has boosted Puffer points, which means if you bridge assets, you earn boosted Puffer points and rewards from dApps on UNIFI. Puffer's core products mean a bright future for Ethereum. Learn more at Puffer.fi.
Jack, as you were talking there, I was kind of thinking of our space in general. It's funny because we just operate on like this binary on-off. Like people will say there's way too much infra, all we need is apps, or there's too many apps, all we need is infra. But as you were kind of mentioning kind of some of the things that FAIR could do, this example you gave is like, right now maybe we can't do a lot of indexing because maybe you can only rebalance 3 times a day, but with something like FAIR, you could rebalance 3,000 times a day. So this kind of takes my brain to, okay, what I still think is cool about infrastructure is if it can actually allow somebody to build new products that don't exist in the space today, I think that's really cool, right? So with you guys leaning into DeFi and AI, is there any things that you're excited about that maybe you couldn't do before, that with FAIR, you're like, okay, this could be a new DeFi primitive that we can now do because of this underlying foundational technology? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And let me start by just kind of like stepping back a little bit. So let's look at the way a blockchain works. Right now, blockchain, every time you're running a validator node and every message that's going around, each time the block, is executed, you get this whole list of the transactions, and it can be, you see the amounts and what they are, and you can build software basically to reorder them. But what's happening is you get to see all the information before the information's final. Okay. And if you think about that in traditional finance or centralized exchange world environments or any environment where databases are talking, when you have the opportunity to keep information private until it's finalized, you always do that. Okay. We just haven't been able to do it on blockchain because a blockchain couldn't validate they had the right information without having that information. But now, because of threshold cryptography, we use BLS threshold encryption, because of distributed key generation, because of trusted execution environments, TEE. All of a sudden, we can have a blockchain that operates just as fast and it's fully EVM compatible, that no one sees the information until the information's final, but the validator is still able to validate they have the right information. Okay. And so I think if you just added such a major feature that like information is private till it's final. But right now it's not private until for some period of time. And, the biggest issue of that is MEV, but the other issues are because of information, like I said earlier, like just things like limit orders and index rebalancing. And I think there's a whole world of new things people are going to start using on chain because they can have privacy until the information's final. And so we're still the early days of how this will be utilized, but it's really a game-changing component.
Jack, what demographics are you targeting in terms of users for FAIR?
Well, one, we're going, two categories. One, we're going right at the heart of DeFi. So there's going to be some really fun, juicy incentive programs. There's going to be some cool features that help reward liquidity providers and stakers. And we really know we need to serve that audience well of these like DeFi experts. And I think there's going to be some unique products that are built on Scale that are differentiated. It's not just going to be AMM copy. You're going to be able to do a lot more with this, with Byte protocol. And the other piece is we want DeFi to not just be this like, circular reference in an Excel spreadsheet of like people trading with each other. What we want to do is tap into these like millions and millions of users that you run on the Scale network. And our goal is to keep growing at scale. Hopefully we have 50 million, 100 million users someday. But guess where they do all their swapping and trading? It's going to be over there. So we want to build this organic DeFi product. And if you're a DeFi LP, guess what? You're going to serve as your LP, not just for people trading and speculating, but people that just want to swap a token to buy something in a game or in a consumer app or a B2B app. So those are the two kind of markets I think that are really, really important.
Jack, I've got a question for you more as like a builder that's been in the space, for, multiple cycles. There was a talking point, I think the last few years, that retail never fully came back to crypto, never fully came back to DeFi. What are your thoughts there? You've been building at the forefront of, trying to enable those products for retail to benefit from. Do you think the statement's true? And if it is, like, why is that?
I don't know if they ever were really here, but I think there's a certain category that was in DeFi that ended up just living in meme speculation world that became DeFi of, Solana really captured a lot of value there, and Base, I think, but a lot of the people in my chat groups I'm in some chat groups of people who don't work in the space. So I get to see some more normie perspectives or quasi-normie perspectives, but these are the same people that were farming that are like, oh, I'm buying this meme coin. And I think we're really getting past that zone. And I think part of that was because of like the macro environment, regulatory environment. But you're going to see, I think, more real products getting, the people are going to come back to real products and look for traction and look for fundamentals and, fun things and hype. But I think, but at the end of the day, whether people have come back or not, we still only have a fraction of the people we could have. We need to make it easy enough for a normal user to hold stable coins and get return, swap into other assets that they want to hold easily, swap into assets they want to use easily with like custodial wallets or non-custodial wallets that are, UX friendly.
So recently we had Brandon Kumar, who is formerly vice president at Accolade Partners, and now he is co-founder of Layer 3. And he had a very strong opinion around the fact that there's so much momentum in what's being built in this space, and that there's been this like negative sentiment, this sort of nihilism that creeped in over the last few years, and that really like we have as many tailwinds at our back as we've ever had in crypto. So anyways, Jack, you had a tweet recently, and I'm not going to read it all, but we'll put it into the show notes and flash it here on screen. So it says, I've been working full-time in crypto Web3 since 2017. I strongly feel like we are at a turning point and a new chapter is starting right now. We are growing up and maturing as an industry. We are going to see more real businesses with more real-world use cases fulfilling the big promises of programmable money, transparent, immutable databases, true ownership over assets and money, and more. What else can you expand on there? I guess, like, why are we to be so bullish on crypto in 2025?
Yeah, and you guys probably see this too. There's always this builder momentum that, comes before the market momentum. And each time when that happens, it's significant and it's a new chapter. It really feels different. And I kept having all these things happen, and the conversations I'm having with people and seeing things and seeing the energy and the enthusiasm and like the sense of urgency. And I was like, wow, we're at another one of these big chapter turns. And, there's been so much weird macro stuff happening and like this Bitcoin dominance and all, people not believing in smart contracts. And it's like, then you step back and you think programmable money. Look at all the things we're doing with it. Look at all the future uses for stable coins. We're not even scratching the surface. Then think about the underlying architecture around that and all the products that are going to connect to that. And I also just see big businesses coming back, and they were scared to do business in this space, and they're coming back. We have some big ones we're working with now that were, some big announcements that were just, it's going to be awesome to get to the next level. And I really feel like we're there. And, and again, people are like, we've always been waiting, but we keep saying it's coming, but go look at our progress. Even today, look at how many people are interacting on chain compared to before. Like, the growth has been impressive, and look at the amount of stablecoin volume happening every day. Amazing. And even Bitcoin, look at the store of value that's there that wasn't there before. Like, so, I'm bullish. I'm excited to be building this space. And I think the things I find annoying as of late, I think are going to start washing away. This, like, I'm a builder, and I like, putting points on the board and helping people win in the right ways. And I think this quick money mindset is not long-term healthy for the space. And I think it's, we're maturing and we're going to get past that.
Man, I totally agree with like everything you said. And I get so sick of the complaints about people like, we've had crypto forever now, but like, what have we really accomplished? I'm like, really? Is that your attitude? Really? Like, so much. And I think it's almost like, that analogy of like, the frog in the slow boiling pot of water. Like, if you've just been in the space too long and maybe you don't realize what's happening around you. But yeah, I mean, I think, so we're lucky we get to have a lot of conversations with people like yourself, Jack, like we're investors. So we're talking to builders like who are ambitious and building new cool things all the time. So to your point earlier, like the amount of building is always front running the price appreciation. And we're totally in another inflection period with like just the mainstream news that's out there right now and the adoption, like let alone what's happening behind the scenes, just the pathway that's opening up for all that building to just like flourish is just, it's incredible. But anyways, I could go on and on. I want to get back to all the stuff you're building right now, like FAIR. When can people expect it to be going live? When can people start interacting with this new ecosystem?
The private testnet's working, which is awesome. And that's one of the reasons why the announcement is, now and not 3 months ago. People are tired of announcements of stuff that's coming. We announced Byte Protocol because we had Byte Protocol working, but it wasn't working in the, it was working, but we didn't have like the FAIR L1 testnet ready. Now we do. And so like, okay, now let's announce this. And hey, the engineering timelines are always subject to change. Our goal is to get this live in Q4, and because we're already operating in testnet, and I think we can do that. I have strong beliefs that we'll do that. I'm excited to go get it out there and get it live and, bring a new functionality to blockchain that, only exists in off-chain order books or different kind of cumbersome products that have to sit on top of consensus.
Right now, I think what you're trying to do with optimizing for AI is really interesting because to me, it's a magnet for new users and builders. And then once you build that thriving economy, again, it's like a new city, just like there might be only like one New York or one Chicago or one London, but they all have their own like unique attributes. So very excited for like what like new applications we'll see here with FAIR launching. But guys, I think this is a great place for us to wrap up. So I want to remind our listeners first that if you're listening to this podcast, FAIR should have been announced. And so you should be able to go to the website fairchain.ai. And then for SKALE, you can learn more about SKALE by going to skale.space. You should follow SKALE Network on X. Follow Jack O'Halloran on X. And then Jack, thanks so much for coming on. It's, again, so great to be able to reconnect. You're always like the most enjoyable person to talk with. So I'm glad we were able to record one of these conversations with you. Anything else
I feel the same, guys. This was really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to have you back. Any final word for us before we go?
I just want to say, hey, I appreciate everything you guys do. I think one of the last times we ran into each other, I think we were both walking. It was ECC, walking in Paris, ran into each other at like 1 a.m. and had this really great catch up. That was fun. But I appreciate what you guys do. And I think DeFi is like just getting started. Like we're turning the next corner, like I said earlier, and, appreciate the content you're putting out and all the things you guys do for the space. And we'll keep doing our part. You keep doing your part, and people listening, keep doing their part. And we got good stuff out of us.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. To stay up to date with future episodes, plus get expert tips, strategies, and exclusive content, subscribe to our free newsletter at the-edge.xyz.